Recently, a mum asked me about what I thought about Exersaucers, and a lot of parents are asking me this question. So today I thought I'd put together a video on the good and not so good points about Exersaucers so you can decide whether or not this is a toy that you want to purchase for your baby. I'll also give you my professional opinion as an occupational therapist on what I think about this toy. But before we do, make sure you click on that free PDF document in the description box below, which covers the developmental milestones you can be expecting for your little one in their first year of life. This will give you an invaluable peace of mind as you'll know what to be expecting and when to be concerned. Also, if you want to make parenting significantly easier, make sure you start now by subscribing to my channel and hitting that bell where you'll learn the tips and tricks I've learned over the last 10 years practicing as a pediatric occupational therapist and being a mum to 2 children. So let's start with the good points about Exersaucers. Firstly, it gives us as parents a much needed break in that you can place your baby in a self-contained toy where we know they can't escape, and it's going to provide them with some stimulation in regards to their fine motor play. This brings me on to the second reason parents love Exersaucers, and that is because babies tend to really enjoy being in one. And that's because there are lots of toys surrounding them when they're in this piece of equipment so they can interact and engage with it. Generally though, I find babies are interacting and engaging with any toy and love any experience, so it's not necessarily the Exersaucer that they're enjoying, it's the toys that they have access to. The third reason it's good is it is a safer option than a baby walker. So baby walkers have been shown to be extremely dangerous for babies, and if you want to know more details about that, then you can check out my video on baby walkers. But Exersaucers were developed in response to the dangers associated with a baby walker. So the difference between these two pieces of equipment is that the baby, when they're in an Exersaucer, are unable to move around. So it's a stationary toy that they're in, whereas the baby walker, they can stand in it and then they walk around really quickly and get access to things that they shouldn't necessarily have access to. And the last thing parents tend to love about Exersaucers is that they have multiple uses. So some of the Exersaucers now can be used as a baby gym. So you take off the toys and then you use those to assemble a baby gym. Then as they get older, it becomes an Exersaucer, and then as they become older again and they're able to walk around, it becomes a stationary play table that they can walk around and engage in. So the not so good points about Exersaucers is it does not help your baby's fine motor or gross motor development. It is not going to teach them how to stand up or walk, and it doesn't help in progressing their fine motor skills, so their ability to use their hands to engage and interact with toys. In fact, if Exersaucers are overused, they can result in developmental delays in their fine and gross motor skills. And that is because when we place babies in Exersaucers, they are not yet able to stand upright. That's why you're using an Exersaucer in the first place rather than a stationary activity PlayStation. So when your baby is placed in this piece of equipment, what they do is they lock their knees because their legs aren't strong enough yet to hold their body upright, and then they lean forward at the hips and then they extend their tummy out, and that's so that the slung seat can support their tummy, so they're kind of basically leaning into the piece of equipment and the seat. And then to use their hands, they have to push their back backwards, and then they have to put their head behind their hips. If you can imagine, this is not the position we want babies to be in when we're trying to teach them to stand. If they're in that position, they're going to fall over. But they don't, because they're in an Exersaucer where the slung seat is essentially holding them in this position. The other thing you'll notice when your baby's in this piece of equipment is that they start to point their toes, and with prolonged use, this can encourage shortening of those calf muscles, which would then result in a baby who is starting to kind of toe walk, so you walk on their toes, which is extremely difficult to do. The other thing is when you're looking with the Exersaucer, the toys that are on the Exersaucer are ones that your baby kind of bats or kind of spins. They aren't toys that they can take off necessarily that are small in shape, so we want them to start using those 3 fingers to engage and interact with toys at the age that you generally be expecting a baby in an Exersaucer. And the other thing that we're wanting them to develop at this age is the ability to release and drop toys. So if it's a stationary toy and they can't pick it up and drop it, then it is not going to encourage that fine motor development. Also, you'll notice when your baby's in the Exersaucer, they tend to stand briefly and then they kind of collapse into a sitting position because their legs aren't yet able to hold them upright, and then they extend their legs again. They're not maintaining that standing position. And then also with the Exersaucers, there's that encouragement of jumping. So jumping means that they will start to kind of point their toes, which will encourage that shortening of the calf muscles, and then potentially toe walking in the future as well. Now, babies are at higher risk of developing these delays and complications if the equipment is being overused. There is no agreed upon time that is safe to use an Exersaucer so that it won't cause these developmental delays. I've read anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes is the recommendation from some physiotherapists, and that's for a maximum of once a day. So your baby would technically only be using this piece of equipment once a day and for a very short period of time. Now, considering a baby should only use this piece of equipment once a day for a really short period of time, I actually think it's actually a really expensive piece of equipment. So in Australia, you can buy it for $150 to $300. And that is generally the Exersaucers that are the 3-in-1. So it's the baby play gym, then it's the Exersaucer, and then it's a stationary activity PlayStation. But $300 is a lot of money, and I personally think having a baby and all their toys is really expensive anyway. So I would rather spend that $300 or $150 towards a piece of equipment such as a high chair that I know a baby is going to use for a long period of time. So I'm talking years they're going to be using a high chair. So I would rather spend the money on that than a piece of equipment that they're only going to use for a short period of time and has the risk of causing developmental delays if it is overused. So parents, you now know the good and not so good points about Exersaucers, and you can make that decision on whether or not an Exersaucer is something you want to purchase for your baby. Make sure you click on that free PDF document in the description box below, and hopefully I'll see you next week where I'll share more parenting tips and tricks.